Welcome. You've come to a quiet place. A place where ancient stories drift like candle smoke, where the voices of long-forgotten women echo gently through time. Tonight, we'll travel far back to the dusty shores of the Sea of Galilee, to a quiet fishing village where baskets are woven by hand, where sandals press into sun-warmed stones, and where one woman's name has traveled the centuries, misunderstood and misremembered. Her name was Mary, not Mary, the mother of Jesus, but Mary of Magdala, a follower, a mystic, a witness to resurrection. You've likely heard pieces of her story, some familiar, others whispered or misread. Tonight, we'll walk beside her, not in haste, but slowly, gently, not for answers, but to witness. We'll begin with her world daily rhythms and rituals. Then we'll hear her story, the moments that marked her life. After that, we'll pause for wonder, exploring ancient scrolls and mysteries, stories once hidden in shadows. And finally, we'll lift the veil and compare her life to those who ruled from above, quiet faith versus power cloaked in robes. Let yourself settle, let your breath deepen, and let the night guide you as we begin with life in Magdala. Break time equals 2 south greater than segment 1. Daily life in Magdala. Imagine yourself walking just before sunrise. The air is cool, kissed by the nearby waters of Galilee. Faint light begins to spill over the hills as fishermen pull nets from the shallows. Their boats creak softly as they glide through the silver mist. You are in Magdala, a small town with a big name, Magdalene, Tower of the Fish. Here, life is shaped by water. The sea feeds the people, washes the laundry, baptizes the young. Mary would have known this rhythm well. Her morning likely began before the sun. She would have risen to the sounds of chickens rustling, the muffled grinding of grain in nearby homes, and the creak of buckets pulled from a communal well. The stone homes were close, sometimes clustered around shared courtyards. Floors were swept clean with bundles of dried branches. Her tunic, likely woven from undyed wool, would have felt scratchy at first touch, softening as it warmed to her skin. Women in her village worked in quiet collaboration. They kneaded bread together, boiled lentils and herbs in clay pots, dyed linen with madder root and saffron, and sang lullabies passed down for generations. Some worked in trade. Magdala was a thriving town, not a backwater, but a place of movement. Boats came from Tiberias and beyond. Spices, fish, linen, and rumors all flowed freely here. The smell of salted fish was constant, sharp but clean. Vendors wrapped bundles in woven reeds, while children chased each other between market stalls. Mary may have grown up with siblings, or perhaps she was an only child, her parents shaping her worldview with quiet intensity. Either way, the life of a Jewish woman in the Galilee was one of repetition and ritual. Each week turned like a wheel. There were preparations for Shabbat, sweeping, baking, washing. There were visits to the mikveh, the ritual bath, a place of purification, quiet, and renewal. The synagogue in Magdala was unusual, one of the oldest known in Galilee. Its floors were paved with mosaics, and its walls held echoes of ancient prayers. Men would sit on stone benches to study the Torah, but women? They listened from behind lattice or doorways, present, but unseen. Mary would have memorized prayers from a young age, the Shema, the Psalms, the words of the prophets. She likely knew the sound of Isaiah's scroll being unrolled, the crackling of parchment, and the rhythm of a rabbi's voice echoing in the stone chamber. And still, even among this rhythm, there were those considered unclean, possessed, strange, women who walked alone, women who were whispered about when the baskets were passed. Mary would become one of those women, not always, but eventually. And before her name became legend, it became a warning, but not yet. For now, she is simply a woman of Magdala, fetching water, grinding grain, kneeling at the edge of the sea. She sees the world in patterns, the weaving of wool, the spiral of fig leaves, the way the sun glitters on scales of fresh caught fish. Break time equals 3 south, greater than these early years, quiet and repetitive, shaped her deeply. They gave her an eye for detail, a rhythm for silence, and perhaps a heart that longed for something more, not more noise, but more meaning, more presence. In a world where women were often overlooked, Mary watched, listened, and waited. She couldn't have known that her name would be spoken by emperors, popes, and mystics, that her face would appear in paintings from Florence to France, that centuries later you would be listening to her story. But tonight, let's let her be just a woman of Galilee, living and waiting. Mary's life with Jesus, healing, following, witnessing the heat of Galilee had changed. The scent of ripe olives filled the air, mingling with the dry dust of the road. Time had passed since Mary walked the shoreline in silence. Now she walked with purpose, because one day perhaps it was at the edge of a crowd, perhaps in the quiet aftermath of a storm she encountered him. The man from Nazareth, the teacher, the healer, the one who saw through veils. His name was Jesus, and her name would never be the same. The Gospel of Luke tells us that for Mary, Jesus cast out 7 demons. What were they? Were they spirits that tormented her mind? A metaphor for illness or isolation or sorrow? The text doesn't say. And perhaps that silence is its own kind of protection. What we do know is that something left her, and something else entered in its place. Peace, presence, clarity. From that moment, she followed him, not in the shadow of obligation, but in the light of transformation. She joined the small group of women who provided for Jesus and his disciples out of their own means. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, wife of Herod's steward, Susanna, and others unnamed. They cooked, they walked, they listened. Imagine them together in the morning, gathering herbs, drying figs, wrapping parcels of bread and linen. These were not fragile women. They were resilient, tested, wise. They were the kind of women who could cross deserts barefoot. And Mary, she was there through it all. When the crowds pressed in and Jesus taught from the hillsides, she stood nearby. When children ran forward with curiosity, she offered a quiet smile. When the sick were brought forward and the air thickened with prayer, she watched, waited, and believed. She had already seen the impossible. She had lived it. She had become it. In the moments of travel, when the men were tired and the path was long, Mary stayed. When tension grew, when the teachers of the law murmured against him, she did not argue, she observed. The Gospels give us few words from her, but her silence is full of presence. And then came the days of sorrow, the streets of Jerusalem, the rising danger, the whispers of betrayal, and still she followed to the courtyard, to the base of the cross, to the place of execution. Mary stood there when others had fled. Her heart did not break with noise, it broke in silence. And yet she remained, and early, so very early on the first day of the week, she came to the tomb, not as a mystic, not as a legend, just a woman, carrying spices, carrying grief. But what she found was not what she expected. A stone rolled away, a voice that asked, "Why are you weeping?" And then a name, spoken gently, Mary. And in that instant she knew. Not because she saw light, not because she touched proof, but because she was known. She was the first to witness the resurrection, the first to be sent, the first apostle, sent not with a weapon, but with a message. Go, tell them. And so she did, not as a queen, not as a priest, but as Mary, Mary of Magdala, healed, transformed, witnessed, and witnessing. Her story didn't end there. Though the Gospels fall silent, traditions do not. Some say she traveled to Ephesus. Others say France. Others believe she wandered the wilderness in prayer. But no matter the location, the truth remains. She had seen what others could not, and she had carried it not just on her lips, but in her life. And so we remember her, not for what the world said she was, not for the rumors history painted around her name, but for what she witnessed and how she remained, the woman at the tomb, the first one to believe and the first to be called by name. Mystery and manuscripts, the Gnostic Mary and hidden histories, there are stories. And then there are stories beneath the stories. Tales whispered between lines of scripture, recorded in ink, buried in caves, and carried across centuries by those who refused to forget. Mary of Magdala was not forgotten. Not completely, but the way she was remembered changed. And somewhere along the slow turning of time, her story split. One path became doctrine, the other a mystery. Break time equals 2 south, greater than imagine a desert cave, cool despite the blazing sun outside. Inside, shelves carved into stone, scrolls wrapped in linen, a scent of old papyrus and ancient dust. Now picture someone centuries later, blowing gently across a manuscript, revealing a name, Mary. Among the Gnostic texts, the hidden writings not included in the Bible as we know it, there is a gospel, the Gospel of Mary. It does not begin with miracles, nor end with crucifixion. It begins in conversation. A quiet moment between disciples after the resurrection. The others are confused, afraid, uncertain, and Mary speaks. She tells them what the teacher revealed to her in visions. She speaks of the soul's journey, of ascending past fear, past ignorance, past shame. She speaks with calm and clarity, but not everyone listens. Some of the male disciples question her, Did he really speak with a woman? And yet Peter is silenced. Levi defends her, and Mary continues. Break time equals 3 south greater than. This text, preserved in fragments, offers a Mary unlike the repentant sinner painted by medieval pens. She is calm, centered, wise, not the rescued, but the revealer. Some believe this gospel represents an early tradition, one in which Mary was not only a witness, but a teacher, a mystic, a vessel of hidden knowledge. She speaks of the soul's ascent, of how each level sheds illusion, the burden of the flesh, the chains of desire, the bindings of false authority. She does not name demons, she names fear and overcomes it. This Mary is not begging for redemption, she is offering understanding. Break time equals 2 south greater than, and she is not alone in the lost text. In the Pistis Sophia, Mary is called the woman who understood completely. In other apocryphal writings, she asks the questions no one else dares to ask. Some writings call her the companion of Jesus, a term that stirs curiosity. In the Greek, koinonos can mean partner, in faith, in mission, perhaps more. But we tread softly here, not to sensationalize, but to witness, to imagine. A woman once dismissed, now standing among the scrolls of the sacred. Break time equals 3 south greater than. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the mid-20th century, they reopened old questions. What had been lost? What had been left out? In Nag Hammadi, Egypt, more scrolls were found bound in leather, buried in jars. Among them, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Truth, the Sophia of Jesus Christ, and yes, the Gospel of Mary. These texts don't offer simple answers. They offer layers, symbol, spirit, silence. They speak not of law, but of inner knowing. Not of punishment, but of purification. And in these desert-buried words, Mary's voice still lingers, soft, strong, certain. Break time equals 3 south. It's worth noting that for centuries, many believed Mary Magdalene was a former prostitute, but the Bible never says this. Not once. That association likely began in the 6th century, when Pope Gregory I delivered a sermon that blended Mary of Magdala with the unnamed sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet. From then on, her legacy shifted. She became the fallen woman, the weeper, the penitent, but the older texts say otherwise. They offer a different kind of Mary, not fallen, but free. A woman who is not silenced, but misheard. And tonight, you are hearing her again, through the hush of history, through fragments and footnotes, through the gentle rhythm of rediscovery. Let her story rise slowly like incense, not demanding attention, just quietly transforming the air. A name remembered now. As your body sinks deeper into rest and your breath begins to slow, you return from the hills of Galilee, from market baskets and quiet fires, from footpaths worn smooth by centuries, from the story of a woman whose name the world once tried to forget, but could not erase. Mary of Magdala, a name spoken by angels, A name called by the risen Christ. A name carried through dusty scrolls and secret libraries, through candlelit cathedrals and forgotten fields. She was not perfect, not untouchable, but she was present. In her presence there was power, the power of witnessing, of standing firm when others ran, of hearing a voice and answering it, of being misunderstood but never misplaced. Break time equals 2 south, greater than. Mary walked where few were willing to go, not just to the tomb, but into mystery, into silence, into the realm where spirit meets breath. She bore no crown, she carried no scroll, she led no army, and yet she saw what others could not. And she believed before they understood, and because of that, you are hearing her name tonight. Break time equals 2 south, greater than. So now, let this story become part of your stillness. Let her footsteps echo softly in your memory, not as noise, but as rhythm, not as teaching, but as presence. You are held in the same breath that whispered to her. The same stillness that called her name calls yours too. You are not forgotten. You are not unseen. You too are a witness to your own unfolding, to the divine in the ordinary, to the mystery that lingers just beyond the veil of sleep. Break time equals 3 south, greater than. Let your limbs grow heavy, like linen laid to dry under a warm sky. Let your thoughts drift, like incense in a temple without walls. And if your mind wanders, let it wander through Galilee, to the shores where the water glistens and a woman waits with quiet knowing in her eyes. Break time equals 2 south, greater than. Sleep now, beloved one. You have walked far tonight. Rest in peace, in presence, and in the gentle knowing that stories like souls can be redeemed, and that your name too is known. Good night.